So I would like to thank the organizer. I'm happy to be here. And I will speak about these vector fields tangential to the universal hypersurface. And maybe at the end of the talk, I will mention some of the works I've done 15 years ago, which were mentioned by Erwan just now. So I will restart with something elementary, intuitive, and not too technical in the first 20 minutes. So the objects of study are complex projective algebraic submanifolds of high degree, perhaps hypersurfaces only, in the projective space, and non-constant entire holomorphic curve from C to X. And we are asking whether, under some conditions, there are proper subvariety Y contained in X, which would absorb all such transcendental curves, even so small that the transcendental curve would be constant. And it will be also very conjectural that this loci would concentrate the space where there are rational points on the hypersurface. This is the long conjecture. So I draw a picture where the f of c is not canalized on Y, but we expect that we can have some equation of certain algebraic severity Y, which would contain all entire holomorphic curves. And these conjectures are very, very hard in my opinion. So today we will work with hypersurfaces in Pn+1, viewed in an affine chart, and in the second part of the talk I will give very technical details. The dimension is n. And we have n+2 affine chart on Pn+1. So we consider, so I'm starting with something very elementary, very down to earth. So we start with an entire holomorphic curve valued in the hypersurface, so it should satisfy the polynomial equation of the hypersurface, which means that P of f1 of zeta, f2 of zeta, fn of zeta, fn+1 of zeta is identically 0. Of course, holomorphic is smooth, so we can differentiate this equation. So we will do it. We will differentiate this equation a certain number of times that I call kappa, the jet order. And as is done in the works of Sophus Lee, you introduce the independent jet variables corresponding to these derivatives. So z prime g1 is thought of as being an independent jet coordinate corresponding to f prime g1 of zeta. Z second g2 corresponds to the second derivative, z f second of g2, but these are independent coordinates. And in the complete jet space of map from C to Pn+1 or even to Cn+1, the jet coordinates are z prime g1 for g1 between 1 and n+1, z second g2 for g2 between 1 and n+1, etc. g kappa, kappa times. So it is a high dimensional space. Very concretely, you start with the equation of the hypersurface in affine coordinates, some a alpha z power alpha with multi-indices. And alpha is less than d, the degree of the hypersurface, which will be around like exponential or even polynomial in the recent works of Bertzi and Kirwan. So we do really perform the differentiation. First equation with no differentiation is some a alpha z alpha, and you differentiate. You use the chain rule. I will come back to this at the second part of the talk. I just survey at this moment. I will come back with more details. So on the second line, you see it's some a alpha dz alpha over dzg1 z prime g1. Okay, this would be that if it would be an entire curve, this is what you would obtain by differentiating with respect to zeta, the coordinate of the source space C of the entire curve. Denote the zero set of these kappa+1 complicated equations as g kappa of Cx. In the slides, I have written only up to jet order 4, okay? But we need to deal, as we know already, for any jet order equal at least to the dimension n. So kappa will be at least equal to n. And we call it the space of entire kappa jet of X. And what matters for me is that this space of kappa jets of map from C to X sits inside the space of extrinsic entire kappa jet of map from C to Pn plus 1 or Cn plus 1 in an affine chart. The current main strategy in hyperbolicity has two steps. The step one, which is the most difficult, is to find many jet polynomials. So this section of the Green-Griffiths jet bundle EGGKM, perhaps tensor with some negative of an ample line bundle, that would provide by Alford-Schwarz lemma theorem, as was reviewed here, algebraic differential equations satisfied by all entire curves. P of f of zeta, f prime of zeta, f second of zeta, f kappa of zeta. So this step one is very, very demanding, and I have dreamed during at least 4 or 5 years to realize this step one in a purely extrinsic way, which means I have dreamed to produce such differential operators by playing with the equations. I never did anything like epsilon of success. I was never able to do this, except in the very simple case of Fermat hypersurfaces. When you go slightly beyond Fermat hypersurfaces, impossible. So, step one is something which I repeated several times in talks, is abstractly, intrinsically satisfying because we have tools to prove that this section space has sections using analysis, holomorphic Morse inequalities, and abstract theorems of algebraic geometry. But it is not explicit enough, and this is my main point today. We have no effective information of such sections in terms of the A alpha of the polynomials. Absolutely zero information. And this is the reason why we have no control on the base locus. We have no effective. And if we would have an effective control on this base locus, it would be astronomically complicated. I speculated in some examples based on some of Sue's papers, which shows that the base locus, the equation of the base locus of such sections should be of degree something like 2 power n power 5, certain power n, certain power n. Astronomically big. So something is hidden. And it is because it's too complicated that we cannot really speak of it. But now, as Erwan explained, there is a second step which works, which is indirect. He states that suppose you have just one section which is not identically zero, which makes that you have a divisor in the jet space. And you will use just one with no effective information to deduce an equation without any derivative, in a sense. I'm cheating a bit. So step two works, and this is what I will present technically now, to find it is not so many, just one. We can play with one. And there was like a remark by Simone Di Verio, which tells you that even you can go to codimension 2 by some trick, which is very elementary. I don't remember the details. But to have, you have in fact an enormous amount of such equations, but you have no control on their independency and transversality. It is very, very, very frustrating, in my opinion. As I said, I tried during 4 years and get absolutely zero. Step two is satisfying, in my opinion. Why? Because in step two, we can do what is natural, in my opinion. We can start with the equation of G kappa of Cx and construct the objects from the extrinsic point of view, from the ambient space Pn plus 1. This is what I will present now. I will review a bit. So I cite a few names here of major contributors in the recent years. And now I will explain what Erwan explained at the end of his talk in a different way with not all details. And then I will really explain what's happening in step two. Step 2 is extrinsic, which is satisfactory in my opinion. It tells you that this space, which is the vanishing of all the equations I showed you, has a tangent bundle which is globally generated, which means that there is a frame of vector fields at each point of this submanifold, as many vector fields as the dimension of the manifold, and which are globally defined, and perhaps with some pole order at infinity. This is what I will say. So, we work on the universal hypersurface with coordinates z0, z1 to zn plus 1 in Pn plus 1, and the coefficients coordinates, which are not constant, but which are true variables, capital A beta. And this is the universal hypersurface written in homogeneous coordinates. So NND is an abbreviation for the number of A betas, which is this binomial coefficient. Okay? And I repeat that we differentiate these equations, and then we can ask whether the common zero locus of this equation is smooth or not. I will come later about this, on this. And we are searching for vector fields. So we have many coordinates. The ZG, not differentiated, the A alpha, which are the constants, which are variables of the polynomials, the Z prime G1, the Z second G2, the Z kappa G kappa, and the vector field, the general vector field in the ambient space in Cn plus 1, or in Pn plus 1, I am working now in affine coordinates, writes as d over dzg, d over d alpha, d over dz prime g1, d over dz second g2, with certain coefficients which should be functions of the ambient coordinates, so that these vector fields are tangent to the equations I showed in the previous slide. I will go more into details soon. And the assumption is that we will be working outside the space of, we will avoid what is called the singular jets, which means that all first-order derivatives vanish. Why? Because by the uniqueness principle for holomorphic functions, either it is identically 0, or it is discretely equal to 0. So if we have a non-constant entire holomorphic curve, we will generically avoid such a set. Otherwise, if it is contained in such a set, f prime 1 identically 0, f prime 2 identically 0, f prime n plus 1 identically 0, the curve is constant and we have nothing to do. And here is the theorem, which I proved in 2009. G kappa of Cx minus the set sigma of singular jets. This is sigma here. Is of pure condimension equal to kappa plus 1. Very good. There are no singularities at every point. Hence, the dimension is the dimension of the ambient space minus the number of equations in red. So you have many coordinates, A alpha, Zg, Z prime, Z second, etc. And now what matters for me, which is useful to finish the strategy, the second step, the third step perhaps, of getting algebraic degeneracy or Kobayashi hyperbolicity, is that the twisted tangent bundle, so the tangent bundle to GK Cx away of sigma, again, twisted by the tautological line bundle of Pn plus 1 up to kappa square plus 2 kappa. So there is an improvement by Darondo in his PhD to 5 kappa minus 2, which is correct, I think. I checked it. And there is a twist also with OPN of 1, just because it is linear in the coefficient A alpha, so it is nothing. So I will concentrate on this twist, on this pole order. I will explain this a bit later. So the statement is that if you twist by this O kappa square plus 2 kappa the vector fields you will construct, they will be globally defined holomorphically on the whole manifold, even on the hyperplane at infinity. And then, as it is written at the end of the statement, at every point of this kappa plus 1 codimension of the manifold, you will have as many vector fields which are globally holomorphic as the dimension of the manifold, which is that we have this number of vector field dn d kappa where the span of this vector field is the whole tangent bundle. It's really a global Cartan frame on this submanifold, as I try to illustrate in this picture. And just a few minutes about the very end after step 2 of the proof that Erwan presented already. So as he said, the step 1 to say that the global sections of jet bundles H0 of X jets is approximately the same dimension because it's so large, it's so big, it's exponential in m, which is this m, it's exponential in this m. When we twist by something times m here, we don't lose the space that there are non-zero sections. So I say it is approximately equal to the space of jet, even minus m times z. You have to check this. And how do you do? It goes back to Clemens and Hein and Voisin. It was generalized by Hsu in some unpublished paper. So what do? You start with a jet differential, any, as this sigma with no information on it. That's the problem. So by the Alford-Schwarz theorem, entire curve satisfy this identically zero, which means that it is exactly this divisor here in the jet bundle. Okay. And now you use the vector fields that I have not yet constructed. I will construct in the second part of the talk. And then you want to fix a manifold, but the key idea is that you have surrounded vector field because the vector fields are on the z part, on the a alpha part, on the coefficients part. And there is an abstract argument which gives you no effective access to what it is. It says that there is an exceptional subset in the parameter space, which I call B here, such that outside this exceptional set, there is a jet differential which is smoothly parameterized by this parameter A, so that you can differentiate with respect to A indeed. Okay? So this is what I try to represent. Usually people don't write a quotient here, but when you try to do computations in coordinates, you see that it is rational, in fact, here. You see it. I speculated on that. So this is why I put a rational expression here. And now you take one parameter outside this exceptional set. Remember that with the Fermat hypersurface, we realize that you have to work on a Zariski open subset because this is not always a Kobayashi hyperbolic. And now you take an entire curve valued in such a hypersurface x a0 with this such differential. And then the claim is that the zero locus of all the coefficients p gamma here is the subvariety y you want to get. So this is the assertion here. I repeat. Denote yi0 the set of z in x a0 such that p gamma of z a0 is 0 for all gamma. Assertion. Then y a0 is a proper algebraic subvariety, of course, because the jet differential sigma is not identically 0, which contains all entire curves. Again, this is not very satisfactory because we have many p gammas, but we don't know what is transversality between them. We have no information on that. We just have one equation. So this was done by many people. And how does we proceed? Very informally. So we start with this jet differential, which is denoted sigma on the blackboard, identically 0. And suppose by contradiction that f of zeta 0 is not in y a0 above, by just shifting the point zeta 0 on c, you can assume that the derivative does not vanish, because it's just a discrete set when it vanishes, because the entire curve is not constant. And then I try to represent what's happening on the fiber. So on the left, the manifold X, so hypersurface is a productivity space. Above, there is a fiber, a bit like the figure of R1 in this talk. And then you will use a tangential vector field, which I call V in the figure, which is called T in the slides. And I will apply this vector field, which I will construct in the second part of the talk, to this jet differential. And this vector field T here is bringing tensor with O kappa squared plus 2 kappa. If I apply p times, where p is an integer, this vector field to this jet differential, it will tensor my jet differential by p times kappa squared plus 2 kappa. But to have this differential equation to be still satisfied by the entire curve, I need to have this still negative. And this can be arranged. So I need to put a lot of negativity in advance, so that when I do this until p equal to m, p is less than m, it is still negative. This is doable, it's technically okay. And once you are doing this, so it is not the full story, because we have to reason by contradiction, in a way, because in the jet space, we have global generation, all the derivatives. So we have the derivative along the z prime and the z second, and the z kappa. You remember this. There is a lot of directions. So this means that by applying a derivative t, you can essentially kill the derivatives here of the entire curve, so that you get effectively something which is not depending on derivative, which is a true algebraic equation. I'm cheating a bit, but I'll repeat that intuitively the vector fields help you to get rid of the derivative, to get a true algebraic equation without derivative. That's what we want to understand. So now it remains, so I mentioned that Eric Reidel and Young, they were able to show that it implies a Kobayashi hyperbolicity when you have just one equation at the cost of raising just a bit to plus n, the jet order, the degree, which was anyway much higher than linear in n, anyway. So I don't enter the details about the degree. And now I start the second part of the talk, which consists in giving you some flavor of what is the proof. So now it will be elementary and not too informal. I try to give you the details of this construction, okay? And I guess that everybody will understand everything, so I'm almost sure you will understand everything. So it will not be a survey talk now, it will be like a basic baby linear algebra, okay? It's just linear algebra. In fact, everything is just linear algebra, in fact. But, well, with clever ideas anyway. So we start with this algebraic equation in homogeneous coordinates, some A beta, Z beta with multi-indices. And we work in a Rapham chart, Z0, non-zero. And also it is also projective in the A betas, so we assume that A0, D00 is non-zero. And then we have a copy of alpha and Cn plus 1 contained in Pn plus 1, and alpha and C NND contained in P NND minus 1. Okay. So now the universal hypersurface writes under Z1 power D, because it was A0, D0, I divide by this, it becomes 1 in front of Z1 power D, plus all these other monomials with alpha 1 less than D here. And the A alpha are still quotients of capital A, as is written in the slide. They are quotient of this. So it's very elementary what I will say. It's very easy, in fact. And you divide by this. And of course, here, the alpha 0, which appears here, the sum should be equal to D here. The length of beta should be equal to D. So this is the alpha 0, which appears here, should be equal to this. Anyway. So now our coordinates will be the little a alpha and the z's. And by convention, the coefficient of Z1 power D should be equal to 1. So we're restarting something elementary. Again, the jet coordinates are Z, A, Z prime, Z second, Z kappa in an enormous dimensional space. So now I will be a bit more specific about the production of this equation. This is the equation of the hypersurface, which is the greedy polynomial. This is the derivative first derivative, second derivative. So for instance, the Z prime G1 is differentiated once here, but there is a Leibniz rule. So this part should be differentiated once again, once time. And this is why there is a double sum here. Sum G1, G2 with Z prime G1, Z prime G2. And the sums of the G's here are between 1 and n plus 1, always, as here. if I differentiate once more, there will be this z-second g1, which becomes the z-third g1. If I differentiate here, there will be z-second times z prime, and also 2 times z prime z-second. This is why there is 3 here. Okay? And now the last term is, again, you differentiate one more time this thing. This is what why you have a triple sum. Okay? Elementary. And this is written up to jet order equals 4. Well, there is a way to abbreviate what's going on by introducing the total differentiation operator, which is in the works of Sophus Lee, because I was inspired by the works of Sophus Lee when I wrote this paper. And Sophus Lee, just very quickly, he prolongs the diffeomorphism action to the jet bundle to see whether you have invariant ODEs or PDEs, and everything was there, in fact, in his complete works in German. So what is the total differentiation operator? It's exactly what's happening here. You differentiate something with respect to the jet variable z kappa lambda, and you multiply by z kappa lambda plus 1. Exactly what I said here. This, when you apply the total differential operator to z prime g1, you obtain z second g1. Because you differentiate with respect to z prime, and you multiply by z prime plus 1, which is z second. When you apply the total differentiation operator to this part, by Leibniz rule, you obtain this sum here. And more simply, when you apply the total differential operator to the first line, you obtain the second line. When you apply the total differentiation operator to the second line, you obtain the third line, etc. Okay? Elementary. So there is a way to abbreviate this equation as follows. Is sum A alpha Z alpha, D of sum A alpha Z alpha, Dn, because now I will stick to jet order equal to the dimension. Okay? Everything what I'm saying, it goes the same way for jet order higher than dimension, but to simplify, I will stick to this case. So it was done for any jet order, not in my paper, but in a paper by Lionel Darondeau. And then there is a lemma which is not in the complete works of Sophus Lee. It is not really in the literature. This is the general formula. So I try to read it with you. So the n plus 1 defining equations of Gn of Cx write as follow, where now kappa is between 0 and n. So there are many sums. First, there is a sum A alpha here. And I repeat that for step 1 to produce such sections, you would have to play with such equations in some way to get some section explicit, which is extremely difficult. But for step 2, to construct this vector field, it is more accessible. Because it is infinitesimal, in fact. It is not algebraic, it is infinitesimal. So it is one deep reason why it's more accessible. But remember, here, there was some A alpha, Z alpha here. Everything was with a sum A alpha. You remember it? So this is why in the general formula, there is here always some A alpha in front. Okay? And then what? There are some integer coefficients. We don't care about them. They are explicit, but any coefficient will do. And there are some derivatives of the Z power alpha. Remember, in the previous formulas, that you have these derivatives of the Z alpha, third time, fourth time, etc. And then it is multiplied by some jet monomial. Remember this here. So now it is Z prime, Z third, with some indices. And always all the sums for all indices, and some integer coefficients, which are exactly the ones I showed you. Which are exactly these ones, so you can check that this matches. But so, there are many sums with the G's here. But it might be that there is a ZG, which is differentiated lambda 1 times, which is repeated with other G's. Okay, this may happen, as in the previous formula. You have, for instance, here, Z prime, Z second. So Z prime is appraised twice with different indices. So I try to express it in this way. I try to say that this first collection is the sum of Z lambda 1 times derivative with different indices and all the sums, G11, G mu1 equal 1 to n plus 1. And next would be Z lambda 2, Z lambda 2. But I want to ask that lambda 1 is less than lambda 2, strictly. Less than lambda 3 here. And then lastly, there is some multiplicity, which is this number of Z lambda 1s, which I call mu1. So this is a precise sum. You can also write in terms of partitions, but this way of writing is more precise. And this is the sum with the multiplies of the lambdas. The total jet order, the total number of derivatives should be equal to kappa, and this is the formula. We don't really need to know the formula as it is written. What you need to know is that every term in the formula is a sum A alpha times a certain derivative of Z alpha over certain Z's times a certain jet monomial. This is the only thing you really need to know. It is some A beta, some derivative of Z beta with respect to this, times a certain jet monomial. This is the only thing you need to know. And here we don't want to determine whether there are nu 1 is equal to nu 2 or not. We don't need to really know this. As I said, a general vector field on the jet space writes as follows. Certain unknown coefficients Zi, d over dzi. So we have to compute these coefficients to be tangent to the kappa plus 1 equations. Some A alpha d over d alpha, Z prime k d over dz prime k, and this capital Z prime, capital Z second k is an unknown. And now what? There are 5 families of vector fields in the paper. Of course, as I decided to do something understandable, I think you follow what I'm saying because I'm not going too quick. I will present only the first of these 5 families of vector fields, which is the most interesting because the other families are less complicated and have pole order lower than the first family. So I present only the first family, okay? And the first family is very special. It will be a family of tangential vector field only along the A alpha coordinates, no Z prime, no Z second, no Z third, and only with length of alpha less than n. So of course it will not at all be a frame. It will just part of the frame, the first part above 5 collection of vector fields, which I don't show everything because it would be like a survey and nobody understands anything. Okay, so in the space of only this variable A alpha up to only length L. A second family would be all this D over D alpha for alpha between N and D, that I do not show, and the other families with this D over Di and D over DDG lambda. So we fix a point P in this n jet space of maps valued in X, which means that we fix a point which satisfies the n plus 1 equation D some alpha Z alpha, D of some alpha Z alpha, the equations I showed, and we work outside the space of singular jets. So this means that at least one Z prime I is non-zero. Okay? So I fix an index for such a Z prime I is non-zero. So I will be working only in Z prime I non-zero. Okay? And then what? I write now more precisely these equations. Remember these equations. I write more precisely these equations by specifying certain monomials A alpha, n plus 1. I have n plus 1 equations. I want this subvariety to be smooth. So I need to show that their differentials are linearly independent. And this is what I will show. To be smooth, this is a characterization for a submanifold to be smooth. So, sorry. So I write the first equation with no differentiation. It is A0 plus A epsilon I Zi. Epsilon I is the index with 1 at the if place and 0 elsewhere. And Zi, it corresponds to this index. 2 epsilon I Zi squared. which is not written. N epsilon I, zi power n. And all other A alpha, Z alpha, which are called Z A beta, Z beta, for all other multi-indices beta, different from the ones I showed, the n plus 1 first I showed. Okay? And the second equation, I said, you did total differentiation of the first. And you total differentiate, up to n times. It could be kappa times, with kappa larger than n. Even less than n. And then what? You look at this equation. In the dots, it is d kappa of the ik, which is the ik differentiated kappa times, in a sense, with the chain rule. So in the dots, in the middle of the array, and it is an n times n array, in fact. So you seem to be happy because now what you would like to say is that you can solve the A epsilon I, solve the A2 epsilon I, A n epsilon I, in terms of the other variables, so that now you have a graph, which is a smooth manifold. When it is a graph, it is smooth. Unless the determinant is not identically 0 and there is a singularity. But we are lucky here, and it was done for this. This determinant dzi, dzin, dnzi, dnzin, which is exactly in the previous slide, the determinant of this, is computable. So in previous works, it was a Wronskian. I changed this determinant to something which by luck is just a multiple of z prime I. So since I'm working in the set where z prime I is not 0, I get a smooth manifold of codimension n plus 1. So it is an exercise to verify that this determinant is a certain product of factorials times z prime I power n times m plus 1 over 2. And remember the jet order, the pole order I discussed was about kappa square plus 2 kappa. When kappa is equal to n, it is n squared plus 2n. This is essentially due to this and a little bit more complexity that we will see later. The pole order is due to this, essentially. And Lionel Darondo was able, I did not try to review what he's done, but I mentioned, it is important, he was able to say that if z prime y is not 0, you can use the zi axis as a horizontal coordinates, and then you improve the determinant with something z prime I power 2n plus 1 instead of n squared over 2. But I just show today what I've done. Okay, so now, because this determinant does not vanish, you can graph or can solve the variables a0, a epsilon I, a n epsilon I, as everything else by Cramer's rule, because it's just plain linear algebra, it's nothing. Corollary, it is smooth, outside z prime I equals 0. Corollary, because if not all z prime n vanish, at least one is non-vanishing, G and C is geometrically smooth away from singular jets, so we can speak about a frame of tangential vector field, because it is smooth. We don't need to use this theory of vector field tangential to singular submanifolds, subvarieties, sorry, which is very, very good, but we don't need to use it. And then, to be a bit little more precise, a0, a epsilon I, a n epsilon I are certain functions of the remaining things. So the z prime, z second, z n, because kappa is equal to n in this talk, and a tilde I are all the others, a betas, which are different from 0, epsilon I, which is 0, 0, 1, 0, and epsilon I. So we are seeking, in the first family, vector fields which are tangent to these equations. So we apply this as a derivation to the n plus 1 equation. So go back to this n plus 1 equations, this one. You take the vector field, you apply to this equation, you're looking at what it gives. And then, because the derivations is only for alpha less than n, all the A alpha larger than n will not exist when you apply this derivation. And it is linear. The sum A alpha z power alpha is linear in A alpha. So derivation is essentially obvious now because it's linear. So what the equation you get are the following. So remember there was little a0 here. I differentiate with respect to d over d little a0 times capital A0. So I get capital A0. Okay? Here it is A epsilon I zi, capital A epsilon I, capital A n epsilon I. And these capital A's are unknown. I should solve them so that these tangency equations are satisfied. And as I said, there are some other A alpha, the alpha, but for alpha less than n, because my vector field in the first family, I don't show the other families, they are just restricted to such kind of form. So we have no more equations. And now we have to solve this equation so that these are satisfied. It is elementary. And first of all, I will even restrict myself to vector fields of the following form. So, which is a special form of such vector field, it will be the vector fields of the following form. For alpha not equal to 0 epsilon I n epsilon I, which correspond to these alphas in the sums here, I'm seeking for a vector field, I'm searching for a vector field of the form d over d A alpha, plus something that I have to compute which is unknown, d over d A0, plus something d over d A epsilon I, d over d A n epsilon I, which is natural because you have a graph, so horizontally it is A alpha, and you have to adapt the slope along the vertical axis. It is very elementary. So now I take a vector field like this. I apply this vector field to the previous equation, which means essentially that I put A alpha equal to 1 here, and I have a linear system to solve, just plain linear algebra. And this linear algebra system is the following. So it's Bi, but before, in principle, when you have a determinant, you divide in Cramer's rule by the determinant. You have to divide. So now, not to have to divide, I multiply in advance my vector field by the determinant z prime I, which I showed you, which is z prime I power n times n plus 1 over 2. I multiply this in advance, not to have denominator here. I apply the vector field. So these are the equations that the Bi should satisfy so that the vector field is tangent. It is a linear, I said it's absolutely elementary what I'm saying. It's not advanced. So I just have to solve this linear system. What you see is that Bi alpha 0, once you have solved from this n times n linear system the Bi alpha k, you can solve the Bi alpha 0. Again, to solve the Bi alpha k, you see that this is the same determinant which is assumed to be non-vanishing. Because I put the determinant in advance in here, there will be no denominator. And then, the formulas for the Bi alpha k are the following. I replace the column number k by the right-hand side in Cramer's rule. And these are effectively, these are the determinants here. And this is the final formula for Bi alpha 0 here, which is given by this formula. And now we have the formula. It is very elementary what I'm saying. The other families are so elementary. Now we were working on a affine chart Cn plus 1. You remember this? You say that a polynomial is always something which has pole at infinity. The pole order is the degree of the polynomial, essentially. Because why? We were in the affine chart, capital Z0 non-zero. If we change affine chart, for instance, for capital Z nu non-zero, you have to divide by Z nu. And the change of affine chart amounts to say that T0 is 1 over Z nu. This is what you have to do. So this vector field that I have constructed, I have to prolong it to the hyperplane at infinity by changing 1 over Z nu, etc. for all these nu's between 1 and n plus 1. So this means that the polynomial will be replaced by this. And as you see, there is Z nu in the denominator. So there is a pole order equal to the degree of the polynomial. But here, we have jet differentials. We have jet coordinates. We have z prime, z second, etc. So we need to also know how this transfers, the jet transfers to the hyperplane of infinity, which means that 1 over z nu differentiate one times, which will be z prime I over z nu minus zy z prime nu over z nu squared. And you differentiate 2 times, 3 times, etc. And you just look at the maximal power of z nu, which will be the pole order at infinity, which is for second order derivative 3. For first order derivative 2. So the pole order of the k order derivative is k plus 1. It is elementary. And it is essentially okay. Now, by this reasoning, you realize that the pole order of a jet monomial z alpha, which alpha is a multi-index, z prime alpha 1, zn alpha n, is the sum alpha. Alpha is the pole order of z alpha. And as I said, z prime has pole order 2. In fact, it is multi-index, that is plus 1. See, it's 1 plus 1, so it is length of alpha 1 plus 1, and n, then it is length of alpha 2 plus 1 again, length of alpha n plus 1, so it is plus n here, the pole order. And now we see that the pole order of delta, the determinant of z prime I, which is z prime power n times n plus 1 over 2, because the pole order of z prime I is 2 times this, it is n squared plus n. And now I have to explain what is the pole order of these other monomials. Before I do this, I come back to the formula for delta of z prime. Delta of z prime was this kind of derivative here. And instead of this, I say number 2 because pole order is 2. Here is number 3 because it is z second times z prime, which is of pole order 3. I do it here like intuitively here. So the pole order of this is the pole order of a determinant with all the monomials that have such pole order. So when I expand the determinant here, I see that it is 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 2n, which is indeed equal to this. And all other determinants have the same order. All other terms in the expansion of the determinant have the same pole order here. So I'm doing this the same for bi alpha k. I write the pole order of its members. So remember, I had a formula for bi alpha k, which was this. The k colon was replaced by this. The pole order of this is alpha plus 1, essentially. So I put the alpha in advance here in this formula here, and compute the pole order of the other terms, and this is what it gives to me. This is essentially written here. So I put alpha in advance, and the pole order of the kth column is this. All members, when I expand the determinant, have the same pole order, which is n plus 1 minus k. So the pole order of bi alpha k is this. Okay? And we are almost done because it remains only to look at the pole order of bi alpha 0. And bi alpha 0 was equal to this delta times the alpha pole order alpha. And the ones I computed the pole order times the zi's. And I take the maximal pole order. And if I'm doing this, I finish essentially the estimate. No, it's a slide after. So you realize that the pole order of bi alpha 0 is alpha plus n squared plus n, but remember that in the special vector field, alpha was of length less than n. So n plus n squared plus n is indeed equal to n squared plus 2n. So the theorem is proved for the first family. Remember the statement of the theorem, it was stated for jet order kappa instead of n, but the proof is the same, there is no modification. So it was kappa equal n squared plus 2n, the pole order. So if I twist by this means I will kill the pole at infinity, and so the vector field will prolong holomorphically to infinity. And this is explained. And Darondo was able to improve the pole order to something which is linear in the jet order. What can be dreamed better than it's optimal. Nobody will improve this, it's impossible. So now I think I can speak 10 more minutes. And I will speak in a very impressionistic way, because I have not really prepared this, of other aspects, not going into the details, just to say something about what I've done in these years. First of all, so Erwan mentioned that in our joint paper, we had a degree which was essentially exponential, very, very, very large. So Lionel Darondo, in his PhD, was able to improve this degree to... So Lionel Darondo was able to improve this to n power 2n. So if you go to a computer, which I did in some talks, you put n equals 3, 4, 5, it will be that the number of digits is absolutely astronomical for this. It is very big for this, but there is no comparison. So recently, Berzi and Kerwan improved to a polynomial degree bound in terms of using a compactification of non-reductive GIT quotients and also Thom polynomials, which is a breakthrough. I want to mention something. I'm going back to the past, and in the joint paper where we had this bound, as I said, for the second step, with the vector field, is n squared plus 2n. So n squared plus 2n in comparison to this is not epsilon, it's even negative epsilon. So it's absolutely no comparison. Even with Darondo's bound, for vector field, 2n plus minus 5, 5n minus 2 is even smaller. The big difficulty is to find sections of this Green-Griffith jet bundle slightly tensor with slightly negative ample divisor, negative of ample divisor. And if you are looking at what we've done in this paper, the degree bound we find for existence of differential equations is about 2 power n4 plus all this crap. Okay? But if you tensor with this n squared plus 2n, there is a little bit more crap here. But it's better to say nice bound than better bound with crap. So we stated it in something like looks good. Not with some, it's slightly better, but if we state a paper with a little bit more crap here because it's just for step 1 here in this statement. So there is, the main difficulty is here, in my opinion. As I said, I repeat once again, I spent 4 or 5 years to get 0, because I wanted from the equation I dealt with this step 2 with the vector fields, construct jet differentials extrinsically. But the computations are not of a size non-comparable, and I am not even able to have something existential. But I believe that there is something behind. I really believe it. Anyway, I want to mention that in these papers we have for existence of differential equations such a degree bound, and not going into the details, tell you that it goes to the Demai tower of jet bundles with these tautological line bundles with this distribution with the relative projections. So we have a line bundle over xn, which is Oxn of mem. The sections of this are the same as the sections of this. This was done by Demai. And then we have to tensor, so there is a trick with netness, relative netness. And then you apply the holomorphic Morse inequalities. So, of course, Gergely has also played with this. And now, this is the true life. So the true life is that you get polynomials of such kind of things. And because the dominant term is positive, for degree large enough, it will be positive. So it will be saying you that there are sections in this Demai sample bundle instead of Green-Griffith bundle. So in dimension 6, I did something on 15 computers at that time to get some degree bound. I'm never doing this anymore. It's an error of youth. And then the thing was to was to get something in any dimension. A bound, effective bound on any dimension. It is about 40 pages or 50 pages of computation. So these are the slides I've done at that time. So you have this kind of monomials in chain classes. I played like 3 years ago with the same things using the Gergely-Berzzi formula with these rational functions that Lionel used also. And I was not able to get something because I conjecture that with these things, one in principle get a bound, a degree bound of the form, I would say like 5 power n or 6 power n, but not 10. I'm almost sure, because I played a lot, and Lionel also, but we were not able to finish this computation. Because there are a lot of positive and negative terms, as you see in the chain classes. Before you express the chain classes in terms of the degree of the hypersurface, it's absolutely awful. And even to get some degree bound of this exponential type, it is absolutely awful anyway. But to get something neater, I was not really able to get constant power n. I conjecture that it is true. So this is why the degree bound polynomial in n is an improvement, a real improvement by Gergely-Berzzi and Frances Kirwan. So these are just a review of these. You have such relations, polynomial relation between the chain classes from one stage to the other stage. A lot of elimination ideas. Elimination computations, and what I am doing, because I was coming from analysis at that time, well, don't do algebra, majorate. You cannot compute, so majorate. This is what I did, only inequalities until I get this degree bound. But I repeat that we are very far from the theorem for hypersurfaces in Pn plus 1. For hypersurface in Pn plus 1, the same statement, as Erwan mentioned, was proved by myself before de Mailly in degree bigger than n plus 3. So this paper is not often cited after the paper of de Mailly, so I was happy that Erwan cited it. But I repeat what I said, because it was one of my best works. It was published in the Kobayashi Memorial Symposium edited by Junjiro Noguchi in 2015. Just compare what is, for existence of a differential equation, what is 2 power n power 4 with n plus 3. So I relied much on the ideas of Erwan in his previous papers, and I was able in 2010 to prove that there exists differential equation in this kind of optimal degree, which is so degree, at least n plus 3, characterizes the fact that you have a general type hypersurface in Pn plus 1. So it is after this, and I will finish my talk by just showing a bit. It is about 80 pages of proof. It's not trivial. It starts after this. So first of all, my inspirations, I see I still have 2 minutes, so I will speak 2 minutes more. Green-Griffiths in 81 or 80 were able, for the case of surfaces, due to a vanishing theorem for the H2 in the Euler characteristic, to show that in degree 5 you have differential equation because the Euler characteristic is positive when the degree is satisfied. They were able to show this, okay? And this was my inspiration at that time, so I did it in 2010, it was published 5 years later, that in degree at least n plus 3, for jet order very high, as was said by Erwan, and also as was said by Junjiro, the m should be even much higher than the k. So it is exponential, it is logarithmical, essentially. So I can show that the number of algebraic differential equations is minorated by something which is a number, rational or rational number, times d minus n minus 2, where n is the dimension, minus something which is smaller when kappa tends to infinity, because there is log kappa power n. And to finish the talk, it is an asymptotic and sure bundles with a control on the even dimensional cohomology using a bit of holomorphic Morse inequalities, as Erwan himself did in his famous paper in dimension 3. And then after 80 pages of computations of majorations, again it's a bit of analysis, there is asymptotic of Schur diagrams, you get to the result. So here is a picture, because when the jet order tends to infinity, this diagram has some asymptotic shape with some weight, and you have to really to look at what it is. And there is a final estimate. So these are again this formula with the Euler characteristic with the Chern classes. And again, you have to look at the shape of the Schur diagrams like this, etc. I even don't remember because I did it in 2010, so I'm honest with you. And there is a final estimate. This is the last slide, with only numerical sums here, with some else which come from the Schur bundles here, and then you are able to show that the remainder is small because you were able to control to majorate H2, H4, H6, and you know the Euler characteristic. It is easy to get. So I'm done. Thank you for your attention.
You mentioned that you were trying to compute some explicit jet differential equations that had to be satisfied. Were you trying to do those sort of on the universal family, or
yes,
like, yeah,
absolutely yes. But the trouble is that with the equation I showed you, I'm speculating because I did get just 0. You have to multiply these equations a lot of times. We give you a lot of more equations until you can, by some process, create some denominator which will have some vanishing, which will, in Alfvén chart, say that you have some vanishing at infinity to have holomorphicity. And if this is, I think it exists. Also, Damian thinks something like this exists. But we were not able to find it, and there is probably a reason, is that these extrinsic equations that you have to manipulate until you find these good denominators, which kill the complexity of the numerator at infinity, they are much, much more complicated than the ones I showed because there are multiplications of this equation to get some. This is because, as is known by abstract intrinsic arguments, vanishing theorems, this m has to be big. But in the equations I showed, the m is not big, the number of primes. It's not big, it's just up to degree kappa or degree n. It's not big. This, to be exist, is exponential in terms of n. So this means that this equation I showed you, if one is able to do something in the whole family of hypersurfaces, it would be that multiplying this equation by themselves a lot of times, so that there are enough primes in some, and create some denominators. So it might be like unfeasible. And it is frustrating because, as I repeated, I was stuck during 4 years until Damian was able to prove Kobayashi conjecture. I failed. He was able to do. My strategy was a bit close to the one of Hsu to construct this with more effectiveness, but I understood after some years that if they exist, they are inaccessible. Which is like philosophically very frustrating because I work a lot in Cartan theory, in Lie theory. In small dimensions, you have similar formulas. You have denominators, you have rational expressions, you have something in jet bundles which gives you curvatures explicit because you can work in small dimensions and it's rather progressive. But here to produce such sections extrinsically, which means, I mean by this effectively and explicitly, there is a jump like this, which is like going to very far in the universe. From dimension 1 to dimension 2, there is too high jump. No computer can do it. So it is also frustrating for this reason. So I'm thinking now, because I was, when you have just, there was this no shame in total failure. So this was said in Fields Institute by McQuillan, no shame in total failure. But maybe some indirect route or long special case, I will do something anyway. I will come back to it.
Are there any other questions? Thank that again?